friends! Welcome back for another magical movie review. It's me, Magic by Molly. I'm really tired today. I didn't do any of my makeup. I've been wearing my glasses all day, so you could probably see some glasses marks on my face. It's just been one of those weeks where I've just had a lot happening. So this is what you get. We are continuing our MCU series of magical movie review. Again, we are watching these movies in chronological order. So right now we are on our third installment of our series with the first Iron Man movie, which of course is interesting that it's the third in our list chronologically, but it's actually the first released of the MCU. So I'm excited to get right into it. If you haven't seen a magical movie review before, we break things down into 4 major parts. We've got magical moments, things that really stand out to me as fun or entertaining. We also have enchanting efforts, which are things that just don't really land well with me or things that I have a lot of questions about. Then we also select a VMP for the film or for the episode, so a person that just wins. And then we top it all off with the rankings of the film in the series that we're doing. So we'll just jump right into it. I will personally start off by saying that Iron Man is somewhat biasly my favorite of the Avengers because it was the first, and also for some reason it wasn't until a couple years ago that I actually watched the MCU all the way through, but I had previously seen all of the Iron Man movies multiple times. So in general, I was just excited to watch this movie again because I love Iron Man. For me, it's classic Avengers. I'm always ready to watch it. I'm also a really big classic rock fan, and while a lot of people shit on AC/DC, I love their music. It's classic. It definitely puts me in the mood for Iron Man movies, and it kind of just gives the movie a different feel than all of the other movies that have just unique scores, of course, that are recognizable, but as soon as you hear Back in Black or Shoot to Thrill, like, you know Iron Man's about to come in and save the day. And to me, that's a magic moment every time you hear their songs playing. It still gives you that feeling of what an original score for like Captain America would do, more relatable, I feel like. So I'm into using AC/DC as the platform in which Iron Man enters a scene. I also think, of course, Robert Downey Jr. does a fantastic job as Tony Stark, primarily because he doesn't have to change himself all that much to be Tony Stark. I mean, we all know so much about Robert Downey Jr. at this point. He's a playboy, he's a recovering addict, and a lot of that just kind of plays into who Tony Stark is, or who Robert Downey Jr. used to be. And I think it's entertaining to watch Robert Downey Jr. almost portray some of his own real life character arc within Iron Man. And while I think a character arc for the majority of these heroes is pretty expected at this point, the one thing that I really enjoy about Tony Stark's character arc is that it happens pretty early in the film. So he's a jackass playboy here at the beginning, gets by on making weapons and tearing through women left and right. Then he gets captured, he's in the cave, and within the first 30 minutes of the movie, he has decided to turn his entire life around, redesign what Stark Industries is gonna do with the technology that they have and how they can have a better impact on the world. That happens so early in the film, whereas most of these other films that we're so used to with just like singular heroes in it, it takes the entire movie for them to get to the point where they're actually ready to be a good human being or ready to be more realistic. Let's just say that, because I think that covers a few heroes that we're going to talk about soon. I enjoy that just because it's a different pace, and then we're able to see the fruits of his labor, whereas you've got someone that becomes a good person at the end of the movie, and then you hope that they continue that path and they do good things. Whereas here, Tony's an ass, then he's a good person. Of course, he still has like jackass tendencies just with his attitude throughout the movie, but we're able to see him actually develop the Ironman suits and save those families from the terrorists. Like, we're actually able to see him follow through on what he's saying he's doing, and I think that that's a magical theme throughout the film. So I enjoy that. The moments between Tony Stark and Pepper Potts are phenomenal. I think the back and forth banter in the writing is incredible for them, but of course Robert Downey Jr. and Gwyneth Paltrow have good on-screen chemistry. Probably more so with the playful banter and bickering than like their more romantic moments, but the playful banter moments make the romantic moments believable. And I'm okay with that because I feel like that's a more realistic romantic story. Because you know me, we learned this from the Captain Marvel review. I'm not a huge romantic person. I don't have to have a whole lot of lovey-dovey moments. But of course I like to see people have loving relationships. I mean, I don't want people to be lonely and miserable. I'm not that big of a dick. It's nice to see a real relationship of how couples actually bicker back and forth versus like all of this falling in love, like maybe some tragic backstabbing or like betrayal, but like in a dramatic sense versus just like Tony's a dick and Pepper doesn't put up with his shit. So I'm all for it. I also think Jeff Bridges as Obadiah. Jeff Bridges can do no wrong for me. I think he's fantastic. And physically and theatrically, it's just a different type of Jeff Bridges than like we were used to seeing at that time. So I thought he did a phenomenal job. Do I super love his character and his story? Maybe. Stick around for Enchanting Efforts to find out more about that. For the character that was written for him and who he is as a person, I thought he portrayed that character very well. Another magical moment for me, and I oddly think that this ties back to my love of like the sidekick characters, like when we were talking in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I love, like, one of my favorite things about that movie is the actual creatures and the little personality that they bring to the story. In a way, we get that in Iron Man with the technology that Tony Stark is developing. So we get that with Jarvis. We get that with the little fire extinguisher robot. I don't know if he has a name. I'm blanking on it right now if he does. Tony has surrounded himself with a family that he created from his own two hands that all have their own personality, of course, self-serving for him. It brings a little bit more flavor to the genius playboy. Like, it's not just he's got a bunch of money for a company that develops the technology for him. Like, he does a lot of his own work, and in his shop he's got creatures, so to speak, that keep him company and keep him a little bit more human. So I think that that is just fun to watch those moments, especially as he's developing all of the marks of the Iron Man suit, and to see him fail. Like, that's another really great thing about Iron Man, is that by no means is he a perfect hero. He clearly fails many times to get the Iron Man suit to where it needs to be, and we're following him along on this journey of like how many times he has to try and test and retest and fail all over again repeatedly until we're able to fully enjoy with him the satisfaction of his first flight in the fully developed Iron Man suit. Hi, girl. The first flight was also a really great magical moment. That being said, my favorite parts of the movie is probably like the first half, maybe the first 3/4, and then honestly I could probably turn it off like for the last 20-30 minutes and be fine. Surprisingly the opposite of what I might say for Captain America. Like, I thought the best parts of Captain America were there at the end. And so with that, we're just gonna go ahead and dive into enchanting efforts. I think most of my enchanting efforts do relate to the end of the film. So one of the things that I don't love about Obadiah, which I mentioned before, I thought his big reveal as the ultimate villain, I remember when I watched it the first time that I wasn't surprised. Even in the beginning when they did the montage of how Howard Stark died and Obadiah stepped in to kind of take over the business until Tony was old enough, like, you can kind of predict there, well, of course this guy's gonna be pissed that this young buck is in here taking over this business that he's worked so hard for. So it's really not surprising that, like, he ultimately ends up being the one that's Tony's arch nemesis. It was predictable in itself, which honestly, let's be real, most movies these days are. It's very rare for me to be completely surprised by something. But it was also kind of the reveal of it. It felt very anticlimactic for us to find out that he was the one that really ordered the hit on Tony Stark. I don't know. It just seemed empty. And maybe that's partly writing for him, but with Jeff Bridges, like, having such high caliber talent here, like, they could have done so much more with Obadiah. The end of the movie is purely action. Like, it's purely the fight scenes between Obadiah and Pepper and Tony, and it's okay. It's also kind of predictable, but I kind of would have liked some of that action to be spread out in the movie, to have a little bit more of that throughout the film, because the fighting was good. I always enjoy watching Iron Man battle on the screen, but just we got so little of it, and it was so concentrated there at the end, and a lot of it was just like shit talking from Obadiah, talking about how, like, he deserved all of the glory, basically. Now, for one big thing that, like, just really didn't make sense to me as we were watching the movie, so it's the scene immediately after when Tony's, like, on the phone and Obadiah comes up and does that weird, like, sound zombie thing, and he takes the arc reactor out of Tony's chest, and Tony's like, he of course leaves Tony there to die. It's always a mistake to leave the hero there alive. Like, most of the time the hero's gonna, like, save themselves and be totally fine, so it really wasn't that big a surprise. But Tony's, like, struggling, trying to get to the heart in a box that Pepper made for him, and he's crawling across the floor of his shop, and he's got one of those rollers that you would use to, like, go under a car, because of course he works on cars as a mechanic, and he pushes that out of the way to keep dragging himself across the floor. Why not just use the roller to roll yourself towards the heart? Like, use that as a tool to help you in this situation. Every time I watch this movie, I think about that. Like, you could have sped this process up just maybe, even if it was just a minute, it's still a minute more you would have had to help the whole situation at the end. I don't know why that bothers me so much. This Manatee is very demanded. She's my Peppa Potts. Last week she was Goose, this week she's Peppa. Peppa Potts. I also think, while I love Tony and Pepper together, and Pepper's interactions with Tony are very funny, and her interaction with the reporter, which is one of my magical moments, but I didn't list it, where she, like, takes out the trash or whatever. I think they did her a disadvantage in the first movie, where they could have involved her so much more, but I do think they make up for that in future movies. But she just doesn't get as much screen time as I would have liked for her to have, because she is an entertaining character to watch, and she really is kind of the puppet master behind Tony Stark, and really makes him shine the way that he's supposed to shine. With all of that being said, of course, for this week's VMP, I have to go with Tony Stark. I mean, he saved his own life in the cave with the doctor, which that was a depressing scene. He is so incredibly smart. He builds the first edition of the Iron Man suit with just scrap metal that he has and sheer will to live. And then he uses his experience to really turn his life around. Not change who he is, but he turns his life missions around. He is using his power for good, to advance technology, to really make sure that he's leaving an important legacy. Because it's not that I need a character arc where the person completely changes who they are. Because I thought Tony Stark was funny. I think he's charming. I think he can be a playboy, whatever. Who gives a shit? I just wanted him to be a good person included in all of that. And we got that satisfying moment relatively early in the film, and I think that that was important. I did struggle this time. Iron Man has always been at the top of my list of favorite MCU movies, and of course I thought it would be easy to put it up there. Captain America: The First Avenger did give it a good run for its money, but I am gonna stick with Iron Man, Captain America: The First Avenger, and Captain Marvel there at the bottom of the list so far. I think it's a classic. I think it's one of my favorite of the precursors to the first Avengers movie. I think it does a lot of really good setup for what the Avengers are gonna be. And of course, you can't go wrong with having the first MCU movie there at the top of your list. And he just set the bar really high, in my opinion. Of course, I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversations that have been started. I have had people who don't agree with me, or people that do, that have commented on my videos and have started really fantastic conversation and taught me some new things. So I wanted to take a moment to say thank you to those people who have been active on these videos and really started engaging with me. You guys make this even more fun than it was when it was just for me. So I really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Keep doing it, even if you don't agree with me and you want to say so. That's totally fine. Those are the moments when we get to learn more from each other and honestly appreciate the movie or the series that much more, because we're seeing so many different perspectives on these films. While you're at it, make sure you like and subscribe so that I can keep on doing these and bringing you as much fun content as I possibly can. And as always, stay weird, don't be a turd.